Hi there, and welcome to episode 69 of B2B SaaS Marketing Snacks. I'm Brian Graff, I'm the CEO of Kalungi, and I'm here again with Kalungi's co-founder, Stijn Hendricks, who's a serial SaaS marketing executive and ex-Microsoft product marketing leader. For today's episode, Stijn and I take a look at a comment Scott Galloway, a very successful and knowledgeable entrepreneur, professor, and podcast host, made recently regarding the decline of brand strategy and how people who are early to midway through their careers in marketing and aren't hugely successful yet should look to switch to a career in product or supply chain. He opened up a really interesting perspective on the current marketing landscape, and we thought it would be a good topic to unpack and look at how marketing has changed over time, where it's critical in today's business environment, and how to make the most of your career inside or even outside the marketing profession. Let's get into it. Okay, we are back. Thanks again for joining me, Stijn. Today I'm going to switch it up a little bit, and I don't know if you'd call this current events, but bring in a perspective of somebody outside the podcast. And they had an interesting answer to a listener question, and I thought it'd be worth talking about on here. And so it'll still dive into theory and marketing and how to apply it, but just from a different take than what we usually do. The quoting question, I guess, comes from Scott Galloway. He's the host of Prof G Pod. He's the co-host of Pivot. He has a few other podcasts. He's kind of this business strategy guru. I'm a big fan of his. I like to listen to his podcasts. I know, Stijn, you like to listen to Pivot as well. I was listening to one of his office hours episodes, which is basically where he takes questions from the audience and answers them ad hoc. It was the episode on September 19th, in case anybody wants to listen to it. And he was posed the question, what is the biggest fallacy in branding? And he basically discussed that, in general, the death of old school traditional brand marketing and brand strategy. He says things like the sun has passed midday on brand strategy and talks about how the heyday of brands was post-World War II, where we'd wiped out a lot of our competition. And really all you had to do to generate a lot of growth or shareholder value was to make a mediocre product and put a really aspirational brand on top of it, or a really solid brand on top of it. And that was the combination that worked, right? That's where we saw Madison Avenue and Mad Men and all those, really the advertising heyday. And he says that now, things have changed. And because of the innovations in supply chain and product, the true differentiator is now on the product side and not on the marketing side. As a result, he's saying things like the CMO is already dead and they just don't know it. And because the CEO is in charge of allocating capital for the best return, they should really be looking to take money out of marketing and putting it into product or supply chain. Finally, he says something to the effect of, if you're under 30 and your career isn't skyrocketing in marketing, get out of marketing and go to product and supply chain. So, a lot to unpack there, and I think it's a really interesting take. I don't necessarily disagree with all of it, but I do think that there's some nuances that I think are, obviously I'm biased because I'm a marketer, but I think there are some nuances to unpack and to discuss. So here we are. Any initial thoughts from you, Stijn?
Yeah, a lot of this starts with how do you define brand or marketing, right? I think for me, because I've always been more focused on what I call big M marketing, not small m being more the operationalization of demand gen and presence and automation, and big M marketing more being about, who is it for, what's it for, really what's your value proposition, do you have product market fit? And the latter has definitely changed, but it's definitely not gone, right? If you have a product, you still need to make sure that product serves a need, and you understand who's it for, right? And why that product is relevant and all those things. You can build all the supply chain you want, but if you don't have a product that people actually are looking for, you don't need to supply them very long. And so I think brand being, for me, still part of marketing. It falls in the same kind of scope for what is the problem you're trying to solve. If you're a marketing leader, and if you're in your 30s, that's still true, your main job is to change people's behavior, to change people's beliefs. Sometimes that's why I love behavioral economics, because a lot of what we do as marketers is about changing people's minds, right? Nudging people to do something that they may not have done otherwise, or that they actually would love to do, but they're scared, right? And so there's all these things that go into the psychology behind marketing that I think for some people also are part of brand strategy, and how you think about branding, how you think about making people comfortable betting on a certain product. How do you make people feel that they're part of the same group, right? We are copycats, right? We are and it started, I think, it's the way we are wired from the Stone Age on. We like to be part of a group. We form tribes, right? And one of the behaviors that we have, I think, gotten very good at, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon, is that we copy what other people do, right? So if marketing and branding as part of that is partly showing others what other people do, that is still extremely, extremely valuable, and it works, right? But let's go a little bit closer to maybe where Scott was coming from. Is like brand strategy as a tool to make up for product deficiencies or for not understanding your customer and trying to push something into a market that may not have a purpose. That no longer works, right? And there was a time when that worked actually pretty well, right? Where you could either, because consumers were not as well informed, or it took time for them to get informed, right? And since all that friction is gone, right, and also using words or imagery and visuals, etc., is less. You cannot really monetize that anymore, right? With the AI tools that are available right now, almost everybody can write relatively good written content, right? Can produce relatively okay visual content at a relative high speed. They can do a lot of experiments relatively quickly to test what works. So the advantages that you may have had in the past by using visual instruments or words or language to make up for maybe product or positioning deficiencies, that has gone. That's gone, right? Nobody can really count on that anymore. And then back to the other comment, right? Get out of marketing if your career is not taking off. It might be very true for people who are trying to use those instruments to make a difference, right? If the reason you got into marketing is because you like copywriting or you love designing, right? Even if you're an extremely good writer or a very good designer, your ability to monetize that craft and turn that into a healthy way to make a living, that's really not easy anymore, right? If even possible. But if you are willing to level up and become what I would like to call a big M marketer and think about brand as in really understanding what customers need and be very good at asking the right questions and including using all the AI tools, but now learn how to write the right prompts, right? And use those tools to do research on steroids and to test things faster than you could ever have done that before. And let AI do all the work on the kind of the actual writing and the actual designing, but you're the sort of the creator behind the scenes who makes the pieces work together. There's huge value in that. And especially because the tools are now so great, you can do 10x more than you could ever do before. But you have to maybe learn a very different skill set. So that's kind of, and I have more on this, Brian, but maybe that's a good starting point.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. And I think that's where I'm coming from with a lot of this as well. I think what he's saying in a lot of respects isn't necessarily wrong, right? Like the old adage, and I'm going to butcher this, but nothing kills a bad product faster than good marketing. That phrase has been around for a while, right? And it still remains to be true, and honestly has increasingly become true. And I think that lines up with what he's saying. You really can't wrap a bad product anymore in a strong brand, or it's almost like artificially create a brand around a mediocre product, right? You can't do that and expect to get away with it, particularly with our focus in B2B SaaS, right? When the revenue model is dependent on retention and evangelism, right? You're never going to be able to do that just by throwing some pretty ads out there, right? It has to come from product alignment with the market. But I think that, and also actually, honestly, there are plenty of the big movers of the last decade or two, right, that have used things like product innovation and supply chain to really create their moat and create that true differentiation, right? Amazon, Google, ChatGPT, NVIDIA, right? Those differentiation and that growth really came from a new product or supply chain innovation that really set them apart. And to Scott's point, right, like, with the consumer being more educated than ever, virality is something that, can come much more organically than it used to, right? And can spread much faster. And so I do see what he's saying with a lot of that. But where I disagree is that there are some brands that are still really strong, and really companies have depended on them to grow, right? Even to put two kind of B2B titans up against each other, Salesforce and HubSpot both have really strong brands. Canva really went brand forward, right, in order to get their growth and their disruption of the market into play. And then there's things like on the CPG side, like Liquid Death is water, and they had a huge brand push and were really successful off of it. So there's absolutely a time and a place for brand, right? But I think the nuance really here is, well, what is brand strategy, right? At the end of the day, a brand is it's a point of social credibility and dependability almost, right? It's like, what you're going to get with a Coke or a McDonald's, right? Because the brand has been established across both advertising and product, right? When you see that brand, what's going to happen, and that's why you buy that product. That has still extremely important, right? It's just not going to come necessarily just from advertising alone. And then I think the distinction between brand and marketing is really important to make, right? To your point, just because, creating a brand through ads is less important than it used to be, does not mean that marketing itself is less important, right? I would say actually that marketing itself is more critical than ever, just because the landscape that we live in, right? I was talking about consumers being more educated than ever, right? That means, and that combined with, the Google and the ease of entry to creating content and blogs and ads, right? That means that there's more noise than ever, and you really almost can't afford to not have really strong marketing anymore, right? You'll just never make it to the top. You'll never get found by consumers. And I guess there is, you could go the purist route and say, I'm only going to grow by word of mouth and do the pure inbound play. And that could work, right, if you have a really strong product. But often companies don't have the the budget, right, or the runway to be able to support that. And so you really do need to push it forward. And the way that you push it forward, unless you're in an enterprise sales play, is marketing. So I think that piece is critical. I think it'd be interesting to hear from you. We can talk about the role of the CMO is dead, but I think honestly, from my perspective, it's just evolved, right, as the business landscape has evolved. So I'd be really interested to hear from you kind of how that change has occurred over time, and just like how you see, again, the role of marketing changing from where it was maybe at the beginning of your career to where it is now.
Yeah, it's interesting you use the Liquid Death example. People love to be part of something, right? To affiliate with a group, with an image, with a belief system. And Liquid Death is a great example where that's really all that it is, right? Because the rest is just water. And it's funny that Scott is one of those people who I believe has a brand himself, right? Pivot is a brand.
And he comes from brand too. So it's very
he talks about Apple all the time, or his Rivian SUV, right? So clearly those companies did something to influence him, right? So it's not dead by any means, but I think his point is well taken, that the way to think about it and how to make a difference in that field is completely evolved. So let's talk about your question, right? The CMO role and how it has changed. I think when I think about a modern company, so a company really does only two things, right? It kind of builds something, and it wants people to actually pay for what they built, right? Either ideally in a services model that you get paid for a long time. Mm-hmm. That last part, well, the first as well, they both have huge marketing components, right? How can you build something that people need without knowing what they need, without knowing those people, right? You need to understand them. That's the CMO's job. And then after you've built something, you need to make sure people know about it. And then you want people to want to use it, right? Want to keep using it. All those things. So three things there are the CMO's job. And then building the product, you can argue, includes things like supply chain, right? You can argue that's part of the product almost, right? It's part of the ability of the company to actually give their customers what they need, give it to them on time, give it to them in a predictable fashion, at highly efficient, operational excellence, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if you think of that, the CMO's job hasn't changed that much. They still need to help a company understand what their customers need, who those customers actually are, and then help them, be aware of what the company is solving for, and that that's something they care about, and then help them along their journey to both pick the company at the typical journey of why should they care, why you, and why now, that they end up becoming your customers and ideally your subscribers who stay customers forever. That hasn't changed, Brian. The tools, of course, to do those things have dramatically shifted, right? Where it used to be a lot of, pencil and paper and go talk to people and do all kinds of more analog ways of both market research and then communication. A lot of that now with digital and AI is extremely efficient. You can do things in seconds that used to take months. So that has changed. But so the CMO, and it's also partly, I'm working on a new book, as you're very aware of. It's why I think it's so important for CMOs to evolve their skill set into kind of using those tools to the fullest advantage more than ever before. Because the way the system works now is for a large part dependent on how you use those tools and how you then master those better than who you're competing with. We're still competing for scarce resources, right? If that hasn't changed, our customers are going to only buy maybe one version of something, right, from one company. They're not going to buy 4. So if there is a couple of alternatives, you still need to do the work of, how do you stand out? And that goes back to why Scott talks about Apple and Rivian and not talk about the other brands, right? He's not as interested in.
Yeah, I think, and I'm sure, Scott knows this better than anyone, but I think that marketing has a lot of times marketing gets kind of, people have a narrow view of it, right? And because advertising is what people see, that's what they think marketing is, right? But to your point, right, marketing is much more about having a deep understanding of your target market and your customer, right? And making sure that not only are you communicating effectively with that customer group, but also, right, are you going much further up in the production cycle, right? Do we have the right product roadmap to build a product that our customers love, that our customers really enjoy, right? Like I think you either said it in our pre-show discussion, or I don't think I heard it in your response here, but you equated the CMO to the chief product marketing fit or product market fit officer, right? Which is exactly what they are. Their job is to help to align the product with the customer needs, communicate that effectively, and then we also, in conversations that we have with our prospects and our clients, right, we're always saying that marketing doesn't stop when marketing hands the lead off to sales, right? So not only is marketing on the pre-production side, the marketing side, but also supporting sales. It's also supporting customer success. It's supporting upsells, right? It is throughout the entire customer journey. And it is critical to making sure that, especially something like a recurring revenue model is effective.
The product market fit point, so the product now has evolved, as in it could include things like supply chain, etc. But the fact that the CMO is in charge of making sure that the product is aligned with what the market needs, product market fit, hasn't changed. And you can argue that's more important. It's the primary job for a CMO now than ever. If they spend their time optimizing demand gen by just cranking out more content or trying to beat the Google paid search algorithm, it's just not going to be a great use of their time.
So do you think that there's any distinction in what Scott is saying around maybe his comments have more weight for, the unicorns of the world and the Fortune 500 than they do in the world that I definitely live in and you live in now, but you were in Microsoft earlier. Is there any distinction that is worth noting between, adding shareholder value and marketing's role in that versus maybe just growing a company that, is less than 100 million in ARR?
No, I don't think so. It just all happens at a completely different scale. But whether you're a couple of million in ARR or you're 100 or 200 or a billion in ARR,
right,
the best defense or the best guarantee for future success is to constantly double down on what you think is your ideal customer profile, right? Your fans, the people that you're servicing, that are voting with their dollars, they're voting with their feet, right? They don't leave, they want you to do more, etc. Because those are the source that you have that gives you information that none of your competitors has access to, right? What are these customers really using, really valuing? What do they ask more of? What feedback are you getting from them, right? Which is one of the best inputs for your innovation roadmap, right? And that doesn't mean, there's some of this that is about asking customers, hey, what feature do you want us to add, right? How do you want this thing to look in the next version? And there's value to that. So you don't want to ignore that. But even more important is that you try to constantly understand what are customers really trying to do. Why is that important for them, right? What's behind the initial ask that they have on a certain button on a certain page, right? What is it really what they're trying to do? What would be the real valuable innovation? Where you then, with your engineering capability and your amazing kind of innovation creativity, turn that into solutions that customers wouldn't have thought of, right? That might do something in a completely new way. That's innovation, and it still starts with your ideal customer profile. If you have a couple million in revenue, the journey starts there. You now have enough proof points that this is an important part of the market with a specific set of needs. But if you're now servicing billions worth of revenue, that still is the same. You still can make sure that you understand that group of customers better than anybody else. And that's really what nailing a niche means, right? Mm-hmm. That's how you nail it. And that's how you defend it, right? And up to the point where sometimes you get into the innovator's dilemma, right? You know this customer group so well and they pay you so much money that you forget about maybe other customer groups that evolved, might be more important, that have really a different set of needs that could at some point displace your existing business. Yeah. So there's that tricky trade-off. But that doesn't mean you can't always grow by understanding your existing clients better. And maybe that's even where you would be inoculated a little against the innovator's dilemma, because a smaller group of your existing customers might actually be the ones who say, hey, the way we do things now doesn't work anymore. There's a new way. Right? And if you at least constantly be listening to that, you shouldn't be missing out on that opportunity altogether.
Yeah, I totally agree. I do think that the true success with marketing and really growing, particularly a B2B SaaS company, is intuiting customers' needs and really just knowing them better than they know themselves in a particular area, right? When customers ask for features, that's usually not where you get the breakthrough realization or product development, right? It's about knowing the problems that they have, the jobs that they need to do, and understanding your product capabilities to an extent that you can divine a solution, right, that really moves the needle for them. I think the only other thing that I have to add to this whole conversation that I think really applies on B2B SaaS, and maybe it applies a bit earlier in the company lifecycle stage, but I think it's equally as important later on. It's just that maybe they figured it out, is marketing's role and ability to distill really technical product capabilities and features, particularly in the software space, into non-technical, simple, clear language that is easy to digest, easy to understand, and resonates with a target market. I would say definitely more often than not, probably about 70% of the clients that end up coming in Kalungi's door are super capable founders and technical teams that have built a solid product, right? But do not know how to communicate that to their users, right? They're deep in the weeds and they can't necessarily see the forest through the trees in terms of how to really reach out to the right audience in the right way to generate growth. And I think that is another just key area where marketing will never, get old and is absolutely critical, particularly with AI and the mass of generic content that we're seeing out there today. Okay, one more question for you, and just maybe to touch on that last point from Scott, and then I think we can put a bow on this. Do you have any other advice? You gave a little bit earlier, but any other advice for the people who are early mid marketing career and a little scared by Scott's words, thinking about their next move? Do you have thoughts on kind of like the jump ship versus stay the course? And you did have thoughts on kind of strategy versus execution, but anything else that you have to add there?
Yeah, you and I spent a lot of time talking about this. Maybe we even addressed it in almost every podcast episode that we've recorded the last 2-3 months. When you're younger, your time is maybe less costly and immediate direct cost than when you're older. which leads you maybe to be less concerned about your productivity, about how you use that time. And the reality is your time, actually, the younger you are, is actually far more valuable because there's something like accrued interest in a lifetime, right? The time you spend learning something when you're young, let's say you spend a couple of hours learning something new, is actually far better spent then than 10 years later, because now you kind of accrue the value of that skill that you learned for that period of time, right? It's like accrued interest. And so when you're young, don't make a mistake to kind of muscle your way through doing like mundane work, etc. Now that with AI, you have so many tools at your disposal, so you don't have to do that anymore. Yeah. Get a paid subscription to ChatGPT or your other favorite tool. I think ChatGPT is probably still the best one. If you just pick one and use it for almost everything you do all day long. Ask a question that you would ask someone else, like an individual, to give you advice how to do something, or to help you research something, help you write something, help you complete something, help you review something. In almost every task you do, there's an opportunity to let AI help you do it faster, more productive, not having to repeat it. And if you don't do that, you're really selling yourself short, because other people will use those tools and they will basically get ahead of you. And it involves you also then learning how to use these tools in a really productive way, right? Learning how to prompt, learning how to question, learning how to coach, learning how to challenge. Because those are the things that leaders do and managers, and they've usually done it with the people they lead, right? And now you're kind of also leading these AI tools, right? And unless you want them to become the master over you, you need to learn how to master the tools, right? And that's also the book that I'm working on, Brian. It's about kind of coaching evolved into how you coach not only people around you, but also coaching the AI tools, right? Because the things you do actually when you coach people, when you ask questions, when you challenge them, when you nudge them, when you ask them to set the next step in their development journey, it's really not that different from coaching an AI tool that you're using, right? And so I kind of liken this to now you have the luxury early in your career that you already have a team at your disposal, right? They may not be people, they may be tools, but if you start to think about them in the same way, how can I delegate this work? How can I ask the bot to do something better, right? Hey, could you have made this any better? Why didn't you, right? Give the bot feedback, right? So it will learn and let it get to know you, right? As a coach, one of the things you're trying to do with someone you coach is build up rapport, right? Sort of, you get a sense of trust, etc. When you use these tools, you're trying to build them into an extension of yourself. So that's the one thing I would, if you ask me one thing. And then, of course, there's all these other things that have been true for many years, like know what your goals are, right? I still recommend people that I coach to watch the videos from Zig Ziglar from I think the 80s or the 90s. A very old set of videos. You can find them on YouTube. Just type in Zig Ziglar goals. And thinking about where you want to go, where you want to end up, right? A year from now, 2 years from now, 10 years from now, is a very good exercise. Because if you don't know where you want to go, you kind of know for sure that you will not end up there. Right? So spending time on really understanding what you want out of life, out of your career, is a very good use of time. And then, deciding whether learning a craft like marketing, which of course has evolved, so you learn different things now than you would have learned 10 years ago, is an easier decision to make because you know at least whether you will care enough to see it through, right? And to put all the effort in that you'll need to put in. Yeah, I agree. That leads into what I want to talk about quite nicely. I feel like marketing versus product versus supply chain, I feel like you as you're planning out your career, you really want to get into something that has a solid combination of your ability to do it, so you being good at it, and you liking the work, right? Because if you're not good at it, you won't excel, and you won't probably make it where you want to go in your career. If you don't like it, you're not going to learn as much as you can, or you will be miserable learning as much as you need to, and it won't be a fun existence for you. So you need to find that combination. I think if you like marketing, right, the creative aspect of it, the customer focus of it, right, I think it's absolutely still a fantastic career path for you. But as to your point, Stijn, right, like you need to evolve with the times. And I think my advice
to anyone is to become as strategic as possible, as fast as possible, right? So get to reading, get to listening to podcasts, get to, like, you want to be adding value at the strategy level, not at the brute force, right, tactical level, because that is not a fun place to be right now. I always like to say to people that work for me and for a lot of the Kalungi team members, right, your job is to make your boss's job as easy as possible. And I think that you should look at, in the immediate term, you as the employee should look at it that way, right? Like, how can I take as much off of my boss's plate as possible? A by either just hitting performance as easily as possible or as effectively as possible, or as, you know, how can I take the strategy away from my boss? How can I lighten my boss's load as much as possible? And again, the days of the brute force manual effort adding that value to your boss are just over with AI. And so you have to think about it from, how can I add that strategic value? That being said, right, all that being said, I am a marketer and I'm biased, but if coding is your, you know, you love coding and you love, you know, learning that language and spending hours a day doing that, then yeah, jump to product. You don't need to be in marketing. I will say personally that I tried to learn R in a boot camp one weekend and just could not keep my eyes open. And so clearly that was not the path for me. But that it absolutely works for other people, and there's tons of value to be found over there as well.
The one thing that also hasn't changed is people travel along a journey, right? And a journey comes with stories, and a marketer is still a storyteller, and a brand still tells part of that story, right? I love the whole trusted guide analogy, right? People who want to climb a mountain, they usually want to climb it because they saw someone else stand on top of the mountain. They saw the photo, right? They aspire to do the same thing. That is marketing. That is branding. You brand the mountain, you brand the journey. And then telling the story of other people who've gone before them, right? It allows people to be less afraid and scared, or to learn how to do it, right? Or to reduce friction on getting the right tools, right? And you provide nudges as the marketing leader, as the CMO. So all those things haven't changed. So it's another, I think way to think about it. People's basic human behavior is still driven by fears and dreams, by greed and their survival instinct, right? It's how we make most of our real decisions. And marketers have an amazing amount of tools still available, including how you brand something and how you make the brand become the story, to influence how people then act on those journeys that they are on. But to the point that we started with, mediocre products that you put lipstick on to figure out how to get people to lure people into buying something they don't need. That doesn't work anymore, or it doesn't work very long. And in that case, it's better, those resources are better spent to make the product better, right? And that goes back to the supply chain comment. Make the product better, make the way the product gets delivered better, make the way products get experienced better. But that doesn't change the fact that you still need to understand what your customers need, how to make sure they know about your product, and then how to make sure they love it so much that they will buy it and they will keep buying it or keep using it. And that all still comes down to understanding your ICP, who's it for, and understanding what they need. What's it?
It's amazing how many things just come back down to the basics of strategy and doing it well. Okay, well, thanks, Scott, for the fun thought exercise, and thanks, Stijn, for being here with me again today.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you to Adriano Valerio for producing this episode, and the Kalungi team for helping us make this whole thing work. And of course, you for choosing to spend your time with us. As a reminder, all the links we mentioned in this episode can be found in the show notes. And if you want to submit or vote on a question you'd like us to answer, you can do that at kalungi.com/podcast. Every time we record, we take one of the top 3 topics and jam on it. Thanks again.